Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Imagine it, 1760, Black children, free and enslaved, going to the Williamsburg Bray School to learn to read and possibly to write, and taught that enslavement was God's plan for their lives. The Bray School is still standing at William and Mary. And then there's the historic First Baptist Church of Williamsburg, the third oldest Black Baptist church in America, built by and for African Americans. Remnants of the original building, along with human remains, have been discovered. Preserving Black history in Williamsburg. We'll talk about it next on Another View, right after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. For so long, the contributions of African Americans to the betterment of society have been ignored, not included in textbooks, not discussed in polite society, not celebrated at all in some corners. But slowly, things are changing. We're going to tell you about some exciting things happening in Williamsburg that are bringing Black history to life. But first, our Lisa Godley sat down this morning with our Senator from Virginia, Tim Kaine, to talk about the coronavirus vaccine and the Black community.
I want to start by asking you, have you gotten your vaccine yet?
I have. I was vaccinated in middle and then at the end of January. Yes, so I have been vaccinated. And I've also had COVID, so I'm feeling like I've got antibodies and vaccine. I'm feeling like I'm very safe right now.
Okay, wonderful. Now, your thoughts on the rollout?
Look, I'll put it in two parts. The development of the vaccine has just been shockingly good. Just start to finish, 3 now approved vaccines that so effectively fight it with minimal side effects. It just like breaks all speed records for vaccine development. So that's a good thing. The bad thing is the previous administration had very little planning for the distribution of the vaccines or for the production of sufficient quantity of the vaccine. So when the Biden team came in at the end of January, they were really confronting inadequate effort to produce the quantities that we need, and the distribution plan was not that well thought out. So they've really had to create that. We are now rapidly driving up the production. 70,000 of the single-dose vaccines have already been deployed to Virginia. This will really help. Now what we need to do is make sure that we're being equitable in how we distribute it, because there's still inequities, including, kind of racial and income inequities, even some kind of unintentional ones. So if you'll let me just go on to one more point. If you're, say, in the 1B category, you're over age 65. Well, some people who are over age 65 or over age 60 have good internet, and they can stay at home for hours and hours and hours to try to register. Other people are going to work at jobs, and they can't stay on the computer for hours and hours and hours to register. So even though they're in the same category, they kind of get pushed to the back of the line because their life circumstances don't allow them the free time to go through the registration process that others have. And we're seeing that manifested in variations of who's getting the vaccine out in communities. And so we have to do targeted strategies to reach out to African American and Latino communities who are more affected by the virus than white communities. We got to do some targeted outreach if we're going to try to be equitable at the end of the day.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. A question that keeps coming to me, people asking me, what's happening with the stimulus checks? People keep asking me, where are the checks? What's happening?
Yep.
What's going on?
I'll give you as of 9:20 on Thursday morning, I'll give you the update. The Senate is starting today, and through the weekend, we're going to take up the House bill that included the $1,400 stimulus, unemployment benefits, more funds for vaccination, funds to reopen our schools, funds for our businesses. We're going to start taking it up today. We will likely have a couple of very long sessions today, certainly tomorrow, maybe into the weekend. But the Senate will pass this bill because it's changed slightly, we'll change it slightly from the House version that came over to us. When we pass it, it goes back to the House. They'll have an up or down vote on it and send it to President Biden's desk. I think it will go to President Biden's desk late next week, and he'll sign it, and then we'll start working on processing all of the benefits. We need to make sure that, for example, some people's unemployment benefits start to run out beginning on the 14th of March. We've got to get this done so that there's no gap.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate you taking time to talk to us.
I look forward to talking more in the future. You guys at HRO do great work educating the broader Hampton Roads community, and I thank you for that.
And that was Senator Tim Kaine this morning, reminding us that even though we're getting our vaccine, we still need to wear our masks. So the Williamsburg Bray School, ever heard of it? How about the historic First Baptist Church of Williamsburg and the Freedom Bell? So much rich history behind both of these buildings, and the collaboration between William and Mary, Colonial Williamsburg, and the Let Freedom Ring Foundation ensures that the history is accurate and preserved for generations to come. Joining me on Another View is Dr. Jody Allen, the Robert Francis Engs Director of the Lemon Project at William and Mary. Dr. Allen, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Barbara?
I'm doing just great. Thank you so much for joining us today. Connie Matthews Harshaw, president of the Let Freedom Ring Foundation. Hello, Connie. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Barbara. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining me again. We appreciate that. Matthew Webster is Executive Director of Architectural Preservation and Research at William and Mary. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing all right, Barbara. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us today. And last but certainly not least is Jack Gary, Director of Archaeology with Colonial Williamsburg. Hi, Jack. How you doing?
Hey, Barbara. I'm doing great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. So, Dr. Allen, I'm going to start with you. What exactly is the Bray School? What was going on at that school back in the 1700s?
Okay. So the Bray School was established by the Associates of Bray, and there were several Bray schools around the country, and the idea was to educate, at least certainly to teach the free and enslaved children how to read. They taught them certain skills like embroidery, certain social manners, and basic arithmetic.
Dr. Allen, excuse me 1 second. Let me interrupt you for just 1 second. Are you on speaker? Because your audio has changed completely. Do you have a handset you can pick up instead of being on speaker, or?
No, I'm on my Bluetooth.
You're on your Bluetooth. Okay. Let me do this. Let me give you a chance to our audio guys. Is there anything we can do, or just maybe speak a little?
I can try a different Bluetooth.
Okay. Let's try that, and I'll talk to Matt while we try to get you squared away. So that, because we really want to be able to hear exactly what you're saying. Okay. Thank you so much. So Matt, you're responsible actually for the tell us where the building actually is now and what's going to happen to it.
Currently, the Bray School's on the campus of William and Mary, and what the future holds is that we're really at the beginning of understanding the structure. So we have a date on it through a process called dendrochronology, which is tree ring dating, looking at the growth patterns of trees, and that told us that that this building, the trees used to build this building, were felled in the winter of 1759-60 and spring of 1760. And that's just really the first part. I mean, that identified it at the date of the building, but our understanding of how the building was used, what it looked like, the conditions that these students would have encountered, that's all information that's yet to be discovered. And all indications is that information is there, looking at wear patterns throughout the building, the way doors lock, paint colors or the lack of paint. So there's a lot of research that needs to go into this before, so we can understand truly how the Bray School itself functioned and the conditions that these students learned under
So right now, the building that is physically located on William and Mary's campus was used for something else. It's been added to, right, and so forth. So it doesn't look like it did back then.
No. It's a much larger structure today. The original building, we think, at this point, measures about 17 feet by 32 feet. So it's a much smaller structure, lots of additions. Currently, it's used by military sciences at William and Mary. And so we'll go in there and really comb through that building bit by bit to find all of the information. For instance, one thing that we found is that they were reusing parts of the earlier building for these additions, using them as shims and different pieces to nail to. So our very short initial investigation, we found lots of fragments from that earlier building that had been reused for later construction. So there's a lot to learn in a much smaller building inside there.
So will you do this research before you move the building to Colonial Williamsburg? It will become the 89th, I believe, original structure in Colonial Williamsburg. Is that right?
That's correct. It will become the 89th original structure identified in Williamsburg. And so very, very exciting. But yes, all of this will happen before. We want to make sure that we don't miss any of the information, that nothing is damaged in the move. So there will actually not only be the investigation, but the initial stabilization of that original structure to make sure that it moves intact and safely.
Okay. Dr. Allen, I think we have you back again now. Let's see if yes, we can hear you much better now.
Okay, good.
Okay, so let's start over. We were talking about what the Bray School was and what was going on in that school.
Okay. So, the Bray School was established by the Associates of Bray. There were several across the country, and the idea was to teach free and enslaved Black children. It taught them how to read so that they could read the Bible. It taught the girls learned some embroidery skills. They learned basic arithmetic and social manners. We're not really sure at this time whether or not they learned to write, but they were, and again, it was slave and in free children in Williamsburg.
I thought I read somewhere where they found remnants of not pencils, but slate or whatever you would use back then in order to write. Right. Is that correct?
Right. They did, and what I'm told is the largest single finding of slate markers that have been unearthed anywhere else in Williamsburg. So there's a very good chance, I think, that they learn to write, but it's not in the stated curriculum.
Got you. And so people are surprised about hearing about a school for Black children, especially enslaved Black children, because wasn't the whole idea not to educate them so that there wouldn't be rebellion or there wouldn't be any problem if they remained uneducated?
Right, and but with the Bray School, there was the belief that it was the duty of the enslavers to teach them about Christianity, but it was not necessarily because. Well, let me back up and say, at one point, Christianity could lead to freedom. But in 1667, there was an act passed in the Virginia colony, anyway, that basically said that you can baptize your enslaved people without running the risk of losing that human property. And so there was even a feeling that it would make them more docile, and it was a way of extorting obedience, right? And then there was a particular Episcopal minister who was actually based in Maryland, but he sometimes apparently visited Williamsburg, and one of his sermons, called on the enslaved. He would preach directly to enslaved people, and he would and he said that the enslavers were God's overseers, and that the enslaved people needed to adhere to what they were being told, or they would be severely punished in the afterlife unless they repented. And so while some of the people who were Christianizing and baptizing may have been devout Christians, they may have believed, but they also, many of them, I'm not saying all of them, I can't talk to the agendas of all of them, but we know in the record that these were things that were believed. And again, the law was changed so you could baptize or Christianize without worrying about losing this property. So an underlying theme of this was a sense of controlling the property, making them more docile, making them more readily willing to adhere to what the master or enslaver was saying.
And did the fact that they were educated, was that a bonus in terms of the price for resale of the slave children?
For some of them, it would have been. If you had a merchant or a shopkeeper or someone or a carpenter who needed someone who had, say, basic arithmetic skills or basic counting skills, they might be looking for an enslaved person who could work in their store or in their business wherever. It was not necessarily going to be a bonus for someone who was looking for someone to work in the field, because they needed physical strength. They didn't necessarily need an educated person, and so it would really depend. And some people did not want people who could read and possibly write, because it could also lead to freedom. It could lead them to, talking to others about what opportunities were out there for them. And so it depended on the person, on the person looking to buy someone and their beliefs on what they needed. And yeah.
So, Matt, I want to ask you, what does it take? I mean, from your perspective as an architect and person who studies buildings and so forth, what do you have to do in order to start your research and to figure out exactly where the building is and what was happening?
So what we'll do is the very first thing is we'll document the building as it is today. Every bit of that building will be documented, and then we'll start picking it apart to find the evidence of what it looked like. We'll do paint analysis, so we'll look at all the paint layers and understand what paints were used, wear patterns in the building, and we date a lot of things based on technology. So looking at the way that a saw is used, or how the lumber is cut in the building, what types of nails, and start to pull out all of that detail and allow the building to tell its story. I mean, that's really what we're after here, is allowing this building to tell its story, which inevitably is the story of the people that occupied it.
Do we know if slaves actually built the building?
We do not. I have not seen any evidence of that yet. But it's absolutely quite possible that they were involved. This building kind of sits in an industrial area of Williamsburg when it's constructed, and there's no doubt that slave labor would have been used in those areas. So those are all stories that this building and like I said, all indications are that a lot of the original structure survives. Those materials will help tell that story. And that's why it's so critical that we very carefully and methodically go through this process.
So we've got a standing building that's going on. And Jody, I understand, at least from listening to Rex Ellis, who was with the African American Museum in Washington, D.C., when you all had a program, I guess about a week ago, to celebrate this discovery and to talk about it. And he mentioned the fact that Gowan Pamphlet, who started First Baptist Church of Williamsburg, actually attended the Bray School. Or the supposition is that he attended the Bray School. Is that correct?
Yes. There are 3 remaining student lists that we know of. I'm not sure that he's on one of those lists, but there are many different ways of finding out that information, and that's one of the things we're, at least from the point of view of the Lemon Project, we're working to identify the students and see how far forward we can trace them to find if there are descendants in the community. There are certainly stories about certain families who believe that their ancestors, some of their ancestors, started at the Bray School, and so we'll be working to try to confirm and make those stories public.
So, Connie, when you hear the connection, and you're working with the Let Freedom Ring Foundation, and by the way, in full disclosure, I am a board member of the foundation, so I want to make sure everybody knows that. But that realization of what happened, what's going on at William and Mary right now, and what is happening at the archaeological site for the original building of First Baptist. So, does that give you goosebumps?
It does. It does. It's also not very surprising because if you think about the fact that the Bray School was started and the book that they used was the Bible, one of the most difficult reads, especially the King James Version. I can tell you, I don't know why there was an expectation that they would not read anything else, because once you can read the Bible, you can pretty much read anything else.
I think that was one of the unintended consequences. That
it was. It absolutely was. And I don't know any other place that Gallon Pamphlet would have been educated. This was a small town. I mean, we didn't have cars. We didn't have, wireless phones. And word got around that those children that were educated there, when Ann Wager passed away and the school ceased to exist, those people were still educated, and they felt a duty and a responsibility to teach other members of the community. So I'm not surprised. It does give me goosebumps because now this jigsaw puzzle, this American history now is starting to all come together. And I think that it's just an amazing opportunity for all of us to show the nation what really happened here in the 18th century.
Absolutely. So, Jack, you're working on the archaeological dig. This is not the first archaeological dig for First Baptist. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. In 1957, Colonial Williamsburg conducted an excavation just a year or 2 years after Colonial Williamsburg had acquired the church, and then subsequently demolished the church demolished the physical structure because it didn't fit with the 18th century appearance. But they wanted to see what was underneath this church, if there was an 18th century building that could be reconstructed. And so an archaeological excavation was conducted, and in 1957, excavation looks very different than it does today. They just cut trenches through the middle of this lot, looking for brick foundations primarily to see if there was any building there that they could reconstruct. And they found underneath what we refer to as the 1856 church, so the brick church that stood from 1856 to 1955. They found an earlier foundation. It was very small. It was a brick foundation, but it was never really fully understood at the time what it was. Was it associated with the first era of the church meeting on that property? And I mean, I think we have to acknowledge that in 1957, this story, the story of a black church, was not one that was being told in the narrative of Colonial Williamsburg. So the site was filled back in, and a parking lot was put on top of it, and that's how it remained until last year.
So what have you found so far?
Yeah, so we've removed the parking lot, and it'll never be a parking lot again. And so we've found the foundations of the 1856 church, which is okay. That's the 19th century. This is still really exciting for us to find to put this church back on the landscape, because there are members, and Connie can talk to this, of course. There are members that live here in Williamsburg that went to that church and that are alive today, and to be able to start to outline where that building was. We're able to do that now. We're starting to find that. We're finding that earlier building underneath the church. We're finding that early foundation they found in 1957, and we'll be able to better understand it now to see if we can connect it possibly to the earliest era when the church was meeting on the lot. And then the big news, in a way, is that we've found burials. At least one confirmed grave shaft on the property behind. It's in line and behind the 1856 church foundations, and so we found the rectangular stain in the soil from where a grave is located.
Wow. If you're just joining us, we're talking about Black history in Williamsburg with Dr. Jody Allen, the Robert Francis Engs Director of the Lemon Project at William and Mary, Connie Matthews Harshaw, President of the Let Freedom Ring Foundation, Matthew Webster, Architect at William and Mary, and Jack Gary, Archaeologist with Colonial Williamsburg. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. What questions do you have? Are you interested and fascinated by this history that has been there all along that we're finally discovering and uncovering and bringing to light? 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Connie, the members of First Baptist, the descendants of the people who started the church and the families that have been there, what's been their reaction to the latest archaeological dig and what's going on?
Well, I have to tell you one of the most powerful statements that I heard from them, and I'll quote this. "We are trying to stay quiet, but our ancestors won't let us." And when I heard that, I mean, I got to tell you, it brought chills, because they're saying, all these years, we knew it was there. We did not understand why it had been leveled and intentionally covered up, because they knew that Rockefeller was a man of faith. So they said, well, to hear something only from an Anglo perspective does a disservice to the country. So I got to tell you that the descendants are just thrilled. They're already ready to work with Dr. Blakey to get DNA testing. It's like, okay, we're not there yet. So we're not there yet. We got a couple more things we got to work with Jack and the crew for. But I got to tell you, to be featured in National Geographic, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the entire country now is focused on what's going on in this place where American history started. So the descendants are they're so elated by this effort, and the fact that it's a time of healing for them, because they think that now someone is finally listening to the fact that they were here, they played a part in the history, they built William and Mary, they probably built the Bray School, their ancestors, and they certainly had a place of worship, and they understood Christianity. So yeah, this is pretty powerful for them.
So Connie, when we first started with the Let Freedom Ring Foundation, I am a founding board member, if you will, but we really were focused on the bell that had been restored by Colonial Williamsburg, that went to the opening of the African American Museum in Washington. It was rung there. I mean, it was all that history behind it. Were you anticipating at that point that there would be all this other history coming out from this?
No, in a word. I had no idea that I would quit my full-time job with USAID, because this is, when we say, we were talking about the bell as an artifact. But as they started to explore and excavate this site, Jack will tell you, just something as simple as an ink bottle, which will have amazing meaning. We've talked to the descendant community. They're pulling stuff out of their Bibles where people were married in 1818. No, I had no idea. I thought, you know what, we're going to deal with this bell. People are going to come and ring it. They're going to leave. But the history of this church is so rich that we've got to stand it back up. We've got to use it as an information center. And can you just imagine the people that will now come to Colonial Williamsburg, because they can see themselves in the history of what has happened in the forming of our country. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
So there is a documentary that is being worked on, should be debuting soon, and it is called "The History Half Told is Untold." What does that mean? Why that title?
Well, because you cannot ever understand a whole story with only half the facts. You can't understand history from the perspective of people that may or may not be in touch with the feelings and the experiences of an entire race of people. You just can't. So for those of us who were educated in the Commonwealth, I had to take, Virginia history. I had no idea. We had to go on the 4th field trip to Colonial Williamsburg. I got there, I think I read comic books under a tree because I didn't see anything except the slave piece of it. And I thought, there's got to be a little bit more to this story than we are seeing. And so I think that, and it's not just for African American children, it's for everybody, because we now have families now that don't look like us necessarily. And they're thinking, well, hold on a second. Well, what were y'all doing? And so we need to tell the whole story. And I think I applaud Colonial Williamsburg, our partners in this, William and Mary. There's so much going on. My dream, and I can see it as clear as day, is that this will become a destination for every American citizen to come and hear the entire story of what happened in this country in the early days.
I want to play a little clip from the teaser for the documentary, because understanding the passion of the people who are involved it is really the thing that really brings all of this to life. So let's take a listen.
Here's a bell in a church founded in the year of America's independence by people who were enslaved. Martin Luther King sat in one of these pews and didn't hear that bell. That's tragic.
I think here in the 21st century, we're really trying to tell the story.
To hear that bell ring, it just sets my soul on fire just to hear it, to call the worship for everyone, to know that we don't have to hide anymore.
In any religious association, here comes Gowan Pamphlet at First Baptist Church in 1776.
African American history is American history, and it is so incredibly important to be engaged long-term in the process of rediscovering what we had lost.
It tells the story of African Americans, and that's a piece of history that is missing in everything.
Ring the bell that so many of your ancestors had heard and rung.
We come to ring the bell because we believe in a government of the people, by the people, and for the people.
And so that documentary will be out soon, where COVID is kind of holding us back in terms of the grand reveal, but we are working on that, and it will be coming out soon. But Connie, speak to the and Jody, I'm going to come to you about this also. The thing that strikes me, and especially since I don't live in Williamsburg, but I've heard many stories and many anecdotes about how the communities, meaning the Black community and the white community in particular, got along or didn't. And this effort, in both William and Mary's effort and First Baptist effort, is a multicultural effort. Speak to that, Connie.
Well, I can tell you that the partnership that we have and the request that we're getting from the community to be involved in this project, I think my most compelling revelation was I was at the site a couple of weeks ago, and I called back to NBC Today Show to tell them that I had two men that looked like they had walked off the set of Duck Dynasty. They walked up to me and they said, "I need to tell you about the importance of this project." And I had on a hat, I had on a mask, and I had on my shades. And when they finished with their speech, and they said, "And oh, by the way, we saw this special on NBC Today Show. We need to get this done." And I said, yeah, I was one of the people interviewed. They sort of looked at me like I was crazy and like they didn't believe me. But I have to tell you, that to me was the most illustrative example of the fact that this is not just about African Americans. It is about everybody who wants to see this happen, who wants to hear the whole story. Another example is we have a young woman who was a paper girl, and she was a young white woman. She was a young white girl. She's now older. She was born in 1932, and she said, "Oh, yeah, I went to church there." And I sort of looked at her, and I thought, okay, weren't you going to church at Bruton Parish? And she said, "Oh, no. I went to this church on Nassau Street. I lived right over there. I sat in the balcony. Wow. I delivered papers on Braxton Court. They fed me the best." All of that history is lost. Virginia, we got along. We could set an example for the nation. Duke of Gloucester, we had African Americans living and working on that main strip all throughout colonial Williamsburg. We had shops. We talked to each other. I think that when Dr. Allen finishes her genealogical project, we're probably all going to be very surprised that many of them probably share a bloodline.
But
so we're pretty excited. The town wasn't that big, and it was 52% black. So I got to tell you, I'm excited to see what's going to happen later on.
And Jody, at William and Mary, I mean, you all from the apology that the college did, the whole Lemon Project, and now you have something new coming up in terms of recognition of the enslaved that worked on campus.
Yeah, and I agree with Connie. This is a very multicultural effort. It needs to be, and as she said, I mean, we were all there, from day one. There were, indigenous people, Native American people, English people, and African people, and we were all there. And but the indigenous people and the African people have been left out of the story for the most part, but that's changing drastically now. And we've been, with the 2009 resolution at the William and Mary Board of Visitors passed, acknowledging that William and Mary had owned slaves, acknowledging also that William and Mary had done nothing to challenge Jim Crow, acknowledging that we hadn't been good neighbors, and particularly to the African American community. And so with the Lemon Project, we have been working hard for just over a decade now to try and address those issues, to reach out to the community, to reach out to students on campus, and to make this a multicultural effort, because it's not separate. We're talking about Virginia history. We're talking about our national history, and so it's very important that this is happening, and we are, as you mentioned, Barbara, establishing or going to be building soon a memorial to the enslaved. When the student resolution that's got this ball rolling called on us to develop a memorial to the enslaved people. And so we've been for the last decade now in the archives looking for those people, looking for their names, and when we can't find a name, we're finding people with a skill, or in some cases, there's just what I call a sighting. We see within the document that an enslaved person was doing something, and so we're marking those people. And so we're at just under 190 names or sightings at this point, and those people will be remembered on the memorial. We are bringing them back to campus. They were there. They were in the community. My bet is that we're going to find that some of them were worshiping at First Baptist because, again, there was the free and the black, and the black and the white and the Native Americans. They were all interacting there. And so this story, as Connie is suggesting, I think is going to show strong connections within all of these particular areas.
I want to ask Jack and Matt, who happen to be white men, but I'm curious as to how knowing this history and knowing that a lot of this history had been hidden for so long, does it resonate differently with you as you do your work? Let me start with you, Matt, and then I'll come to you, Jack.
I think it does. I mean, it makes it incredibly important, and I think Connie really hit it, is that if you're missing parts of the story, it's the wrong story, and we have to fill in these gaps. And I think Jack will agree that these details, it's our job to get this right, and we're going to work incredibly hard to get this right. And that's what I was saying earlier about we're going to pour over every detail, trying to understand everything we can, so we can fill in the story properly and tell the complete story.
Okay, and Jack?
Yeah, as a professional archaeologist and as a white male, we have an obligation to the community that is here to tell that story, and I've got a set of skills that I can bring to this, but the questions that are being asked are the questions of the community, and we as archaeologists, as a profession, have for a long time been trying to make sure we're doing community archaeology, and by that we're listening to the communities that are here and answering the questions that they want to answer. So to be able to work on this project in particular, and to have the community here leading us and telling us this is what we find important, it makes our job easier in a way, and it also makes our job incredibly rewarding to know that we're telling the stories that the community wants to be told.
Well, speaking of the community, let's hear from some of them, because our phone lines are lit up. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Renee joins us from Hampton. Hi, Renee. You're on the air.
Hi, how are you?
Doing good.
Wonderful topic this afternoon.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask a question. When I was a little girl, I remember traveling with my girlfriend to Colonial Williamsburg. Actually, it was the residence of my girlfriend's mother, Mrs. Helen Epps. And they actually stole that land back from her. I think it was part of the effort when the Rockefellers were underwriting the restoration of Colonial Williamsburg. And there were individuals who actually owned land, African Americans, and that land was taken from them. So could any of the panelists speak to that time, in the late 50s, early 60s, when tracts of land that were owned by African Americans were being taken back to this restoration effort of Colonial Williamsburg?
Okay. Connie, I saw you nodding your head. I'll start with you.
Okay, and I'm going to call on Jack in case I miss anything. Renee, thank you for your question. You are absolutely right. When the effort to restore Colonial Williamsburg began with the Rockefellers and Reverend Godwin, there was not participation by the African American community, because at that time, no one felt that it was important. There were several families that were displaced. Zach Meredith from William and Mary has done a phenomenal job with a revitalization project, his thesis, which tells us that it was intentional, that yes, they were displaced. And so that's the part of this story that's painful, but the healing part of it now, when we go in and we try to restore and we talk to the descendants, we're going to hear their stories. We're going to hear about Grandma and Grandpa Epps, who were taken out, were offered, made an offer that they couldn't refuse to move out so that they could just restore from the Anglo perspective Colonial Williamsburg. So we're not trying to deny any of that. We are acknowledging it. It is painful. We are giving folks an opportunity to help us heal in that process and to go back and to restore and put in place things that will help tell the experience of the African American community.
Jack, you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, and I'll contextualize it a little additionally in that a lot of people were displaced by what Colonial Williamsburg was doing as they were acquiring land, white and black. But what we try and stress and point out is that the black community was disproportionately affected by the displacement. They didn't have places to go necessarily. Their communities were uprooted, and there wasn't new places for them where they were being accepted to move into. So, yes, Colonial Williamsburg was buying people's property from them, but the dislocation was not the same as it was for the whites it was also happening to.
Mm-hmm. Jody, did you want to add anything?
Well, yeah, I would just say I, too, grew up going to Colonial Williamsburg. I grew up in Hampton, and that's where our field trips were, and I had no idea of the Black community that, Williamsburg had once been, was more than half Black. Also, a lot of people, I was in graduate school there before I knew that most of what's now CW was a Black neighborhood, and Black businesses were thriving there. And there still is a feeling among at least some within the community that Blacks and whites were treated differently in terms of compensation for their property. And so I think as Connie mentioned the word healing, I do think that, those stories need to be dug into so we fully understand. And then healing, this should be a healing process as a result of all of this. We have to acknowledge people's feelings and then go on to take steps to heal where we can.
Okay. Thank you, Renee, for that call. Kit joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Kit. You're on the air.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call. Full disclosure, another white man, 30 years old, moved to Virginia at 8. And for 3 years in elementary school, every field trip was to Colonial Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown. It was like the trifecta. And even at a young age, and even then, I knew that the story was incomplete, that the native peoples and that the non-white, non-Anglo peoples were being left out of it. And I can find no real better illustration than that of the story that I just am now learning about, of buying a Black church, tearing it down and making a parking lot for a Disney-fied white Rockefeller version of history. I'm so happy to hear that African-American voices and stories are being centered, and that this is changing over time.
Thank you so much for that call, Kit. Anybody want to respond to Kit? Connie?
I thank Kit for that. And Kit, I have to tell you that we have an initiative called Beyond February. So that means that we're going to be working on Black history in every other month and every other day of the year with Colonial Williamsburg and with the College of William and Mary, so that no other 8-year-old and white man, but any other child will get half the story. So that's going to be our commitment as a partnership.
I want to get this in before I forget. Young people, there is an opportunity for you to actually work with Jack Gary and his team. The Colonial Williamsburg Department of Archaeology wants to invite youth from 7th grade to 11th grade. Is that correct? I think I'm right in that, to participate in the excavation site of the historic First Baptist Church. And you get to work alongside an archaeologist for 3 consecutive Fridays and learning about architectural field techniques and so forth. Now, you must be between the ages, I've got that wrong, you must be between the ages of 11 and 17. You have to wear a mask the whole time. You have to be able to work sitting, kneeling, and bending comfortably, and bringing your own personal water bottle, and you'll sign some papers to make sure that you're protected. But this is a great opportunity if you're interested in archaeology, if you're interested in learning more about history. If you want to know more information, please call 678-662-0957. That's 678-662-0957. And that is Reverend Grace with First Baptist Church of Williamsburg. And they are working with Colonial Williamsburg to offer our young people an opportunity to come out to the site. And Jack, can anybody visit the site and see what's going on?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we're out there working Monday through Friday from 9 to 4. And folks are welcome. You don't need a ticket to come see this site. Come on down to Nassau Street, and the archaeologists are there working. And just shout over the fence and say, "Hey, what are you finding today?" And we're happy. We love talking to anybody, and this is the way that we can get this. It's another way we can get the story out to folks.
Okay, and Matt, where are you guys in the beginning of your process in understanding? In other words, can people show up at the building now and see something, or are you guys just getting started?
We're just getting started, so there's actually nothing going on at the site yet, but hopefully soon.
Okay. All right. So we'll hopefully be there to see you soon. And Jody, I know that your the memorial is coming. What else is going on with the Lemon Project? Anything you can bring us up to speed in like a minute, because we're almost out of time, believe it or not.
Okay. I want to make sure folks know that our 11th annual Spring Symposium is happening March 22nd through the 27th. It's virtual, so that's why it's so many days. And if you want to know more about it, you can go to the Lemon Project website, www.wm.edu/Lemon Project. And the program will be up tomorrow. And probably, and I kind of alluded to it before, but because of the Mellon Grant, we now have a postdoc who is focusing on genealogy. And so he's doing, his name is Dr. Jawan Johnson. He's doing workshops in the community, but also working, as I said, to our initial focus will be the Bray School students. And we're trying to, find out who those people were, because it's so important that we acknowledge, that we name, that we remember them, because they are the people, the enslaved of William and Mary, who made the lives of the students and the faculty and the staff possible. They toted the wood, the water, they set the fires, they cooked the food, they grew the food. They made their lives possible. And so they need to be a part of the story that is William and Mary. And Lemon Project is named after Lemon, who was one of those enslaved people. Is that right? Lemon was enslaved by William and Mary. Yes. By William and Mary. Okay. And Miss Connie, what else is going on? People can come ring the bell at any time, or are there certain times?
Well, we're closed right now for COVID. We're just as an extra caution. But I can tell you, as soon as the doors are open, we will welcome everyone, not just to ring the bell, but to actually experience what we know Jesse Cole experienced when he rode by Raccoon Chase and he heard the singing and the praying. We want you to come in to Scotland Street, to that site, and to worship with us and to ring the bell, ring the freedom bell for justice, equality, and freedom. That is fantastic. That is Dr. Jody Allen, the Robert Francis Engs Director of the Lemon Project at William and Mary, Connie Matthews Harshaw, President of Let Freedom Ring Foundation, Matthew Webster, Architect at William and Mary, and Jack Gary, Archaeologist with Colonial Williamsburg. Thank you all so very much for being a guest on Another View today. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for spending this hour with us. If you'd like to hear this show again or share it with a friend, you can visit our website, anotherviewradio.org, and download the podcast. And while you're there, please sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. We're on Facebook, so like us, and I'm on Twitter at Barbara Ham Lee. I want to remind you again, as we hear all the things about people becoming vaccinated and getting their second shots, and certain states where governors have declared that no longer do you need a mask and so forth. Folks, the pandemic is not over. Please continue to wear your mask. Please continue to stay 6 feet apart. Please continue to wash your hands frequently. If we just hang in there a little bit longer, we will all be able to take our time and to be able to get back to normal, whatever that is, as we move forward. So let's not rush this too much. Try to be patient in terms of trying to get yourself registered. If you haven't already registered, do your best to try to get registered yourself or to get help if you need it. There are resources available in each of your cities that you can go to in order to help with registration, and the governor's registration line for the state of Virginia. So please, let's all continue to work together. Next week on Another View, it's the Another View Roundtable with the wit and wisdom about today's current events. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Todd Washburn is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. So be with us again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever, whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.